Welcome to Creative Life Story Work podcast, where we explore how a creative approach to life story work can help children and young people who've been in care make sense of their past and build a brighter future. A new model for life story work is being rolled out in the northeast of England, and this podcast will share the latest learning and investigate how it could help improve the lives of care-experienced children and young people across the country. So this afternoon, I am delighted to welcome into the podcast studio my guests, Professor Richard Rose, internationally respected authority on life story work and the founder of Therapeutic Life Story Work International. Hello, Richard.
Hello, everybody.
Tony Joyce, Service Manager and Head of Integrated Services for Looked After Children in South Tyneside Council. And Tony was involved in the Creative Life Story Work pilot between 2018 and 2020. Good afternoon, Tony.
Hi, everyone.
We have Jenny Young, Director of Blue Cabin, the organisation who is leading this collaboration. Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
We have two associate artists who are facilitating the creative activities for care-experienced children and young people. Paddy O'Connor from Mimi Theatre. Hi, Paddy.
Hi.
And Michelle Wood from C-Turn Print. Hello, Michelle.
Hi.
You're all very, very welcome. And I can certainly say that we have the experts in the room to tell the story of creative life story work to date, how we've got there, what's happened, and maybe what we're thinking about doing next. So I was going to set the scene by asking Tony Joyce, just to paint a bit of the picture. Back in 2018, what was it? What were the events that were happening in 2018? What were some of the conversations that happened between South Tyneside Council and Blue Cabin to kick off the conversations about All About Me?
Okay, Dawn. So I think for me, I was becoming increasingly aware of care-experienced adults coming back to the service and returning to request access to their records. And the reasons why they were coming back for their records was to help understand in terms of why some of the key decisions were made for them and help them understand why things were. And for some, they couldn't really recollect in terms of how many different placements there were and why decisions were made. And that was becoming more and more prevalent. For young people that access their records, they didn't necessarily gain the understanding and the information that they needed from that. And part of that reason being is the records weren't, and I'm going to say in brackets still aren't, written in a way which makes that easy for that to happen. So therefore, for quite a number of young people, they couldn't understand in terms of their history through their records. And if, for example, there was nobody still working for the council who was around at that time, wasn't then able to kind of help explain some of that and really help walk through and talk through their records with them. So we had an opportunity through DFE funding. We received funding to improve outcomes for care leavers in education, training, employment. And one of the questions that I got asked on more than one occasion was, so what's life story work got to do with improving outcomes for education, training, employment of care leavers? And I kind of explained what that was and why that was. And it was at that point that I approached Dawn and Jenny Young with a brief. And that brief being is, we want to do some work. There's a need in South Tyneside to do further work around life story work for our young people and young adults. How can we do that in a way that is creative? And the rest really for me was over to Blue Cabin.
And so I will hand over to Jenny. And so, Jenny, if you cast your mind back to 2018, can you remember some of those initial conversations that we had with Tony about the brief, how we might approach that, and maybe why Blue Cabin was the organisation to do that?
So 2018 feels like such a long time ago now, and so much has happened. And I do remember getting that email from Tony. I think it said something along the lines of, have you set up Blue Cabin? Would you be interested in a conversation? We've got some ideas around an area of work, and I think Blue Cabin might be able to help. And what was really interesting and completely coincidental is at the time, Blue Cabin as a company was having wonderings and curiosities around whether we had a role to play in supporting life story work for care experienced children and young people. So the focus of our company is care experienced children and young people and the adults in their lives, and as it's a statutory part of what they should be offered, we've always wondered, well, what does that mean for us as a company? Do we have a role to play? If so, what would the role be? And we had a hunch that because of all of our work is artist-led, and also because we support system change within local authorities, that it could be a really interesting piece of action research, I suppose, or exploration to think as a company about whether we could support this work. And Tony, completely coincidentally, came to us, and through that conversation with Tony, it really highlighted the fact that there was a need in South Tyneside that Tony and the team had identified around life story work, and that us as a company were interested in exploring that as well. And that the time frame of the DFE funding did provide us with some time to think about what that kind of work could look, sound and feel like. But at the time, we certainly weren't an expert on life story work by any means. And we needed to make sure that anything that we did was underpinned by somebody who had the knowledge and experience of life story work and work with children and young people around that. And so I can remember actually Googling life story work trainer, because I thought we would just need to have a conversation with somebody, because we would need to work alongside them in the development of this work. And hilariously, I remember Richard's photo popping up and giving him a ring. I think I gave him a ring, and I left a voicemail saying, "Hi, my name's Jenny, I'm from Blue Cabin and we're interested in this work. It would be great to have a conversation." And really quickly, he either emailed back or gave me a ring, and we set up a call. And I think he was in Australia when we had this virtual call, because he delivers training all over the world on therapeutic life story work. And what was key to meeting Richard and understanding more about his therapeutic life story work model was that Richard was really, really open to exploring the possibilities of how his therapeutic life story work model could develop, how we could innovate, whether it could be developed, and whether there could be artists involved in any element of his therapeutic life story work model. And he was just so up for that and so embracing of that and so generous in his offering, and he just was very okay with it all and said, yeah, I'd love to be involved, and he arranged to come up and visit. And so I think me and Tony and Richard met and had a conversation, and everything started from there, really.
Richard, cast your mind back to those initial emails and conversations with Jenny. If we're still scene setting, what do you remember from those first conversations and cups of tea?
Well, I didn't get the cup of tea, actually, until we met in the big entertainment centre. But certainly I remember Jenny getting in touch. And for me, it's unusual, sadly, to go back quickly on a request. But it just seems sometimes when things are meant to be. And I think I was at the end of a day, I think I went straight back and we just talked a little bit about the project and the thoughts around the project. And one thing that I've always wanted to do in the whole of my kind of career is that life story work for me is a right to all children. And here was an amazing opportunity for one local authority to actually say all our children deserve this. Whereas what I was normally doing would be to do some training, maybe to work with children separately. And here was an opportunity which I couldn't resist. So I think that in the same way as Tony feeling around, that the children that were coming back as adults asking about their story was something that we could suddenly have an opportunity to do something about. And that was too much of a thing to miss out on. And I said to Jenny, I think right from the beginning, when would you like me to come up?
So, Richard, would you like to say a bit about the model that you brought to the project? Because it was very distinct, wasn't it? And that's what we handed over to the artists. So in a minute, I'll ask them about that. But would you like to say a bit about that?
Sure. So really, since 1997, we've been looking at therapeutic life story work as being more than a photograph album, more than a kind of description of what happened, to more of a discussion of why. And so I was asked by my boss at the time, a woman called Mary Walsh, to design a way in which we could gather up the fragments of children's lives, bring them all into one space, make sense of those fragments, and then share those stories with the young person and their carers. And that was my task in 97. And then really with lots of help from lots of different people, including young people themselves, we designed a systemic approach in 3 parts. The 3 parts were information gathering, direct work with children, and then writing their books at the end. And in this work, we started to develop different communication skills. We started to think about the theory behind our practice. And then quite quickly, we realized that although this large piece of work, 9 months in length, was extremely helpful for very, very hurt young people and also for adults, what we really realized was that actually some of those components could be used for young people along the way. And so we started to introduce All About Me books. And All About Me books was a way in which we could capture that child's story every 6 months. And therefore we could celebrate who that child is. We could think about that child's day-to-day, that child's loves, likes, wants, achievements, friends, schools, etc., etc. And it would all be on a book format. So we would give them a book. They would fill the book in. We would then make the book into a nice kind of form of a book itself, which was full of lovely pictures, but it was very much book-based. And then for other children, we were thinking that they don't really need this really long piece of work around that therapeutic life story, taking them from their grandparents to their parents, to their conception, from their conception to birth, birth to their current day and the future, that actually some children really just wanted to think about, why am I where I am today? And so what we thought was, what about if we actually looked at more about me? And in a more about me approach, what we could concentrate is, how come I don't live with my family of origin? How come I live in a different space? Or how come I have these challenging behaviors, and what did they come from and where are they going? And so we do a lot of more about me work to complement children's placements, to help shore up, to give credence to have understanding of. So an example would be a young person that may be living with a family because their mum or dad have issues with drugs, and those drugs mean that they cannot have the capacity to care for their child. So a carer, like a grandmother or an auntie, are caring for them. And that's what we would concentrate on. So when Jenny got in touch and said, we've got this idea, we've got this thought about doing this piece of work, I've brought that model of All About Me, More About Me, and therapeutic life story work as a model, and I said, what can we do with it? So it wasn't about being precious. It wasn't about saying this is the model. It was really about saying, how can this model best fit? What do we need to do? What would you like to do with it? And I've always said throughout my career that, I don't believe in copyright. I don't believe in licensing. I believe in working with children and caring for children. And here was an opportunity for you to take what you felt was good and make it better, which you've certainly done.
Michelle, we've set the scene of the collaboration with Richard, South Tyneside and Blue Cabin, and then the artists were invited to become collaborators as well. What were some of the things that you remember from the very beginning?
It's an exciting journey for sure. One of the things was obviously meeting Jenny, and that was in a different context initially through a social entrepreneurship course. And I was busy setting up C-Turn Print, which later became a community interest company. And the whole premise of that was to take printmaking to people, to enable them to enhance their well-being or to grow in confidence. So really the life story work opportunity was a wonderful way of kind of bringing C-Turn Print into the picture, because it was something I was interested in already, using arts activities, using creative ideas to enable conversation and to help people, essentially. And I remember being invited along to a wonderful meeting, and I think that's when I met Paddy and another artist, Elena. Had a fab time, lots of conversation about what was possible. Have a think about this as a creative idea. What might you come up with? And then having the kind of framework that Richard was talking about. There were certain themes introduced, and it was a case of what could you do as a creative idea? What kind of output could the children or young people create whilst exploring their life stories, and what kind of specific activities might help them do that? And it was such a joy to be able to kind of rise to that challenge and say, oh yeah, well, we could do that. So all sorts of creative ideas were pinging, and then it was a case of responding on paper initially, and then kind of creating these objects or these items and bringing life to them. And interestingly, as a printmaker, I also make artists' books. So Richard talking about the book format, I was really keen to play with that as an artist's book. So for one example is that I would make a blank artist's book for each child or young person, and then the things that go in the book are their journey, exploring their journey in a creative, colourful, playful way, and recording those conversations. So they were some of the kind of standout initial things from the project brief and the opportunity.
Paddy, have you got anything different that you would like to add to that? Because what I remember is, as a theatre maker, you having to think very, very hard about how your practice would fit into the framework that Richard had presented you with.
As Michelle said there, it was definitely a challenge, but with Mimi Theatre, the work has always been about connecting with people. It's always been about life. It's always been about creating those kind of magical worlds that people enter into and take a journey. So in many ways, even though it was a challenge, it also fitted really perfectly into the journey of what I believe and what the company believes and how we work. And just creating those kind of magical environments where people feel safe, feel calm, where they can take a journey and where you can take steps with them to actually pull out their kind of stories and create them in a theatrical way. So even though it was a challenge, it was a beautiful challenge and a beautiful kind of journey, or the starts of a beautiful journey anyway.
I'm interested in finding out from all of you, where were the surprises to date? Where were the challenges? Where did you struggle? And I'm imagining that'll be different for all of you. I'm wondering about Tony from South Tyneside. Where were the surprises and where were the challenges in setting up this work initially?
Yeah, so I think the surprises and the challenges. So I think for me, I was taken way outside of my comfort zone, in terms of what was the day-to-day business. But that was part of why I approached Jenny and yourself initially, from working with you previously and having that trust and having that kind of understanding and being confident, I guess, and comfortable in being able to approach yourselves and to be able to take something forward. And I think trust is very much so is needed, that trust, because at times, yes, I was thinking, you know, where will this go? Where will this lead to? How will we bring it together? How will we deliver this to the staff teams, to foster carers? How will we bring it together? And I've got to say, Richard was the galvanising person within that, because if I recall those sessions that we had at the Word, which again seems such a long time ago. When I recall those sessions that we had at the Word, I've got to say Richard kind of captivated the staff, almost unanimously. The feedback that we received from that, and that for me give us the launch pad. Yes, we've had challenges along the way. Yes, there would be, but I've always felt, and I think that's for a good position for us to be in within South Tyneside, is that we've been able to take some risks in terms of being able to try things out. I think also when I met with the artists, I was just not just Paddy and Michelle because they're here, and others, but is to that initial meeting how much they grasped it initially, and in terms of Paddy referred to the challenge. Well, I guess what I felt within that room and within the meeting is that that challenge was shared by everybody, and that always felt such a good position to be in. So yes, there were challenges, and yes, I was taken out of my comfort zone, but I guess was kind of surrounded by people that were committed to wanting to make this work.
So Jenny, I wonder if from a Blue Cabin perspective, you could say a bit about the challenges and surprises of the collaboration that we embarked upon.
It's really brilliant to hear from everybody, actually, because it's been such a long time since those early days. And I think in looking back from a Blue Cabin perspective, I really agree with Tony in that there were certainly challenges and there were a lot of unknowns in those early days, but also agree that we had everybody in the room to be able to help figure that out. And that felt really reassuring and relatively quite safe as well. The things that also helped, I suppose, were there wasn't an immediate end point. We didn't have to get things finished really, really fast. I think it would have been a lot more challenging if we had a 6-month time frame to deliver a piece of work in. It was relatively long term. It was over a year, and that really helped, I think, and reduced a challenge to a certain extent, that we had time to figure things out together. We had time to develop new pieces of work. We had time to work with the artists and support them in their creative thinking, share things with Richard and get Richard's take on it. So we were given that time, and I think that's credit to South Tyneside Council and Tony that we were given that trust, because I think without that it would have felt very different, and I don't think we would have been able to develop the programme that now exists without that trust and without that reassurance and without Tony holding the entire thing safe from a South Tyneside Council point of view. Certainly, I think one of the things that was challenging for us as a company was whereabouts in life story work would be the place for an artist and an intervention from a company like ours. And I think one of the fantastic things was the fact that with Richard's model, the 3-tier model of All About Me, More About Me and Therapeutic Life Story work, it enabled us to focus on all about me. It enabled us to focus on a space which was, as Richard described, about reflecting on the now, questions such as who am I, what are my favourite things, who is in my life and why, and enabling the artist specifically to focus in on that section. And the 6 themes gave a structure, gave a space for possibilities, so that the artist could then go away, as Michelle and Paddy described, and think about how that space could be filled with their own stamp as an artist and their huge amount of expertise, experience and ways of working, but also combined with Richard's support and the training and the framework of All About Me. And so it could have been a lot more challenging, I think, if we'd have tried to find space for artists throughout the entire model. It was really, really reassuring that we could focus on All About Me, I think. The other challenge for Blue Cabin was the wonder of how best can we make sure artists are held safe? Because our focus as a collaborative team, together with Richard and South Tyneside Council, was always on how can we ensure children are held safely through this process? What mechanisms can we put in place? How can we refer them on for additional support if things come up for them whilst taking part in All About Me? How can we also support foster carers through that process as well? So we were collectively thinking about that, but quite key for us as a company was thinking through in real detail, but what does this mean for artists? They will be working in spaces with children and young people who may be sharing stories, thoughts, past events, and actually what we need to do and what we should do as a company is have a duty of care to ensure the artists were supported. So for us, the challenge was how could we do that? So the wonderings and the things we put in place were reflection sessions for the artists, space that they could feed back on something called Base Camp so that they could regularly reflect after sessions, time together to talk. They could ring up me after each session just to have a chat or drop me a text just to let me know how things went. And the other outcome of it is we've also now introduced supervision for them by a therapist, because actually it's very, very important that they have a safe space to reflect on what's happening in those All About Me sessions as well. So that was certainly a challenge for us and certainly something we took a lot of time thinking through. And I think the last challenge, because there were many, is, and we're hopefully working through that with the What Works Centre funded programme, is the sustainability, the embedding, the policy and processes that underpin this model, and ensuring that this is something that a local authority can take on, that can embed, they can make alive and live as a system, as a process, as something really rich and valuable in their practice, in the way that they work, in their governance models. And I think the What Works Centre funding is going to enable us to really think that through in a lot more detail with South Tyneside Council, who've been through this with us already, but also then supporting Gateshead and Darlington to think that through as well.
Richard, I was going to ask, now that we're 2 years into this project, what difference do you think that it's beginning to make from when we started in 2018?
Well, I think that, first of all, we know each other much better. I think we know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I think that actually just thinking around what Jenny was saying and Tony was saying, there are people that are really comfortable in training or describing or sharing, but there needs to be leadership. There needs to be a belief. And I think that what I found when I first got involved was that belief was very much within Tony, Blue Cabin. And then I think that what happened was in the training, but also with Anthony and other people, that there was this actual clarification that this is where we're going to go, rather than this is where we think we might go, or this is what I'm considering going. There was a clear, this is where we're going. So for people like me, that's easy then, because I can just hopefully help support, think through, but also in a way be managed. And I'm always saying to people that I know, I'm never very good at managing anything. I can't manage myself half the time. So where I can actually be engaged in a project where, playing to my strengths, but also seeing people in the project that have their strengths, and seeing that over the last 2 years really unify, I think that's been the most amazing thing. For me also, the artist. So again, it was not something I ever considered in All About Me. I saw it as being an individual exercise between an adult and a child, potentially their carer. And actually, seeing All About Me done within a kind of creative space with young people joining in, has been remarkable. And I think that the talent of the artists that we have are, immense. I've had the privilege of watching most of the art kind of approaches, and I always go back to that moment we had at, I think it's called the Sage. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it was called the Sage, where we were in that very, very small cupboard, and the artists had all put up their ideas, and I just looked and I just thought, oh my goodness me, this is really how this can all work. So now, watching it kind of going into this beautiful researched opportunity, where we're all wanting the same thing, but we can all see the challenges for us, that we're all up for it. And I think that's the point. So I think for me, Dawn, what's developed is Tony and his team taking it and going with it, showing people that it can work, and then his colleagues in Darlington and Gateshead thinking, actually, yes, we can make this happen. But nothing would have happened if it hadn't been from the leadership from Blue Cabin and Tony, I think.
Michelle, I wondered if you wanted to say anything about the difference that this work has made to you as an artist and other projects that you're involved in.
It's made a huge difference. Absolutely. I mean, as I said earlier, it was something that when I set up C-Turn, I knew what I wanted to do at the heart of C-Turn was help people using printmaking, using art activities. And I mean, to have the amazing training from Richard, that's really underpinned, obviously, the life story work, but it's also helped us, in other kind of areas of C-Turn. So a lot of my work is usually with adults, some adults with vulnerabilities, maybe disabilities, older people that are isolated, all sorts of things that people are really dealing with, just as the children and young people, that are they're dealing with such tricky, issues in the life story work. So it's that underpinning, really, from that training, from the opportunity of having to think and come up with like really innovative ideas. I mean, what a fantastic opportunity, but also kind of quite scary because these had to work. So, we're putting into local authority situations so that the activities and had to work, and few, fortunately, they did. But being able to take on some of those things that I've developed as tools into some other areas for C-Turn has been immense. And you can't measure it. And I think one other thing just to mention is it's about confidence as an artist and taking on new work. So I'm, obviously it's nice to be involved in other Blue Cabin projects and being able to take the confidence that I've gained from the All About Me work and saying, well, actually, oh, that's a wee bit scary, but yes, I can do it, or I'll give it a good go anyway. So, that's on a personal level, that's been fantastic as well. Yeah.
And Paddy, same question. What difference has this work being involved in All About Me, what difference has it made to you?
Oh, again, it's absolutely huge. There's so many things, but I think one, the overall collaboration with the different artists and the different journeys, and also all the people that we've met along this journey through Blue Cabin, including Richard, including Tony. Again, like Michelle said, all the training that has really give you an incredible foundation as a kind of artist to grow. But also, the collaboration with the artists was one of the really kind of key things, because we all took such an incredible and different journey, and those kind of sharing of the stories and our practices has really sort of helped me grow kind of as a practitioner and helped my company grow. But I also think a huge thing, and I say that a lot, is that relationship and connection that we made with the young people and the adults when we started to work with them. I could never have imagined how much those young people and adults brought my work to life and opened doors to my work that I never ever imagined. Mimi Theatre works very visually, so it is very much about creating those worlds, like an installation that they come into. They feel safe, they feel curious, and it sparks that imagination. But it became such an incredible and beautiful relationship between the young person, the adult, and myself, and just how they brought the objects to life, how they, unveiled kind of stories that I never imagined, how they were really kind of how they treated the objects so preciously, and that was so key, and it made me look completely at the whole world that I use and the objects, the masks, the props in a completely different way. And for me, I think that was incredible. And that's really stayed with me. It's really stayed with me, and it plays over and over in my mind. When again I return to my practice, I look at the things that I use, of how they were brought to life, and how they were brought to life in such a different way, was quite incredible. So that was really, really a key thing for me, those things.
Tony, I wondered how that translates into your role in the local authority. What are the differences that this work's making now that we're 2 years in?
Yeah, I think very much so. One of the things that we wanted to move on was where life story work wasn't seen as an event or a task or a piece of work. And certainly what the creative life story work was able to do was almost free people up. Some of the feedback that we received from children, young people, and from carers, just, I mean, as for example, in terms of carers talked about how it was such a wonderful experience and how it was fun and how it was light-hearted. But one of the comments kind of stood out for me is, I learned so much about my lads. And that was just such a lovely thing to hear. So for me, it's a bit about kind of changing the mindset and changing the culture in terms of how life story work is approached, and it's not seen as something that is therefore as an event. And the creative life story work has been able to do that, because I think for me, as I say, is for those that have taken part in it, for those carers, for the children, young people, for those that have observed it as the pastoral support workers, and how that noise is then kind of went out over is very much that's the message that's given. So that helps change the culture within South Tyneside as to how life story work is viewed, and therefore then how it's approached differently. I think, in terms of, as Paddy and Michelle's experiences there, you get, got a strong sense from that, and certainly from this end in terms of our children, young people, and foster carers. That's what's kind of said back. And the key thing that come from young people is how much they enjoyed it, how much they just enjoyed it. So there was so much to be learned from that.
And my last question to all of you is, what are our hopes? We've got more work to do on All About Me with 3 local authorities. So I'm going to go to Jenny first. What are Blue Cabin's hopes for the next steps in this story?
I think one of the things that we really want to do, and we hope that this work enables, is for care experienced children and young people to have ongoing spaces to explore, talk about, ask questions in relation to their life story. It not be a one-off piece of work in their life, because that's just not reality. I still ask, and have the luxury of asking my mum and dad questions about when I was little, about what happened, about family members. And what we would always want this work to do is be never off the table for care experienced children and young people to be curious about what's gone on in their life to that point. And I think our hope is that the creative life story work model is providing that space, and that either can be through a creative experience in the All About Me part of the model, facilitated by the artists and pastoral support workers, or that could be through direct work All About Me with a trusted person in their life, or through More About Me or therapeutic life story work. But it's those moments, those spaces of conversational exploration, so that it's, in a way, if possible, part of the everyday, rather than something that you do life story work only when somebody comes round to visit you for life story work. Actually, life story work is an ongoing conversation that's just never off the table. And I think our hope for that would be that the people who are working in local authorities and also foster carers feel empowered to be able to have those conversations, feel confident to, feel supported to, and that children feel as though there's a safe space for those conversations to take place in. I think one of our hopes too is that the feedback that we got from children who took part in the creative experiences in South Tyneside and their carers hopefully will also be the feedback we get when this is rolled out to Gateshead and Darlington and continued in South Tyneside. So if possible, I just want to just read a bit of feedback from a carer, a foster carer from South Tyneside, and also from a child. As part of the evaluation of the creative experiences, they got to write a letter to the head of Children's Services, Shona Gallagher, and the letters went direct to her, and she opened them up and got this feedback directly about the creative experiences that Paddy and Michelle and Elena and Nicola with pastoral support workers facilitated. So I just wanted to give that direct feedback if that's possible. So this is from a foster carer. It said, Dear Shona, we attended the All About Me session with Nick, supported by Kerry. My little one is 10 and absolutely loved the sessions. Nick was fantastic and each session was so different. My little one loved the activities. Without her realising it, we were having some great conversations about her past and she was opening up about different elements. They were very subtle but big steps for her. I have recommended the sessions to other carers. It really was nice to do something one-to-one with my little one, which had so much meaning in a safe environment. Kerry was on hand to support the whole group and her experience of life story work was invaluable. And then from one of the children who attended, the All About Me project was very good. It was a creative way to learn about me and what has made me. I liked the fact that we met new people and we could share what we had went through and how it has helped us. The part I found hard was thinking back to my past. So Nick came up with a different way which helped me. Overall, All About Me was good and it's helped me to understand what my life was like and how I have changed. Thank you.
Really good that we've got the voice of the child in the room as well. Richard, what would your hopes be for the next chapter of All About Me?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's hard to follow what's just been said, but I would say that we are what we were, and sometimes not being able to talk about that means we're confused about the world we occupy, both our internal world and also our external world. So to have a way in which we can share who we are, we can think who we are, and we can make sense who we are is going to be absolutely crucial for our mental health, for our self well-being and our health. So I think that for me, I would hope that the project going from South Tyneside and beautifully led to the neighbouring authorities will then itself lead forward across the whole of the country. And I think that the one thing I would say, for me anyway, is that when you do see children and young people realise they have worth, and when they have that worth, which is then shared with other children, the biggest kind of marketing we could ever have is when a child says to another child, you should do this. So my hope is that that's what's going to happen, that other children will say to their peers, I did this work with Paddy, I did this work with Michelle, I did this work with whoever, and it helped me. You should do it too. And I think that's something that, is very precious, that us as adults, who are, kind of working with care experienced children, or as Tony said right at the beginning, seeing these people lost, if we can just have one little play in allowing young people to be heard, I think will make all the difference. So my hope is it succeeds where Blue Cabin and Tony started it off in a process which helps all children.
Paddy, hopes from you, the artist.
I think in a similar way to some of the things that other people have said is that you really, I feel very fortunate as a person to be able to look back on my life and know my life and it be incredibly clear and have those really clear relationships with my parents, my brothers and so on. So, I mean, my hope is that we can continue to kind of help people to be able to tell their stories, to be able to, to be able to help them open those kind of doors that allow them to be able to reflect and make sense of the kind of journey that they've taken so far, but also help them really look forward to kind of continuing taking that journey, and that they don't have to kind of look back in a kind of sad way. But they can also look back in a positive way, and they can look forward in a positive way. But I think the hope is to continue to kind of help people on a journey through life, really simple, and really help them to be able to look at their lives and make sense of that, and hopefully by making sense of it, that then helps them have a happy life, a playful life, and be able to kind of then face the challenges of life, because we all have challenges in life, but they're able to face those challenges in a really positive way, and just simply know in a really human way as well that it's a real kind of pleasure to be here in life and to continue. I think that's just really important. So the hope is that this continues on to help people sort of live out a really beautiful life if they can. Yeah.
And Michelle?
Well, just reiterate what Paddy said. I think that notion, as artists, that working with this kind of the life story work is we want to try and make a difference, even if it's a tiny difference, and hopefully leave a legacy with the children and young people and their carers. So it's a legacy to say, well, actually you can be playful and you can use that to promote conversation. It can be a legacy in terms of their relationship, hopefully, between the child and the carer. They've embarked on this journey together, so hopefully there's a legacy there. And I mean, we're taking it into a new realm of potentially online with materials and kits, so hopefully they'll have a legacy in terms of materials and resources to use again, and to build on the life story books or the life story projects, and that it's a continuation. And I think absolutely vital that we invest in our children and young people. That's absolutely vital, and this is just one way of doing that. So yeah, more of it, please.
Thanks, yeah. Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. And last word to Tony, the sender of that email 2 years ago to Jenny, the start of the story. So what are your hopes for Creative Life Story work as we move forward?
So I'll go back to where I started. I think, Dawn, and my hope is that care experienced adults don't feel the need that they have to come back to their records to find things that are missing within their life, because we've got to the point of where we're working, where that systematically we're working, so that will help our young people, children, young people now, help understand their life as it was and as it is, and what they're aiming for going forward. So that's what my hope is. And I think, again, because of this program, because of Creative Life Story work, it has been able to, it's made impact. I think, as I said, about wanting to kind of change the culture. So, for example, our social workers now for children looked after and care leavers, the personal advisors, they're writing the record, they're writing recording to the child, to the young person, and that in itself just puts a different slant on things. It makes people think differently, because then what they're doing is they're actually doing, they are writing the record because it's the child and it's a young person's record. Yesterday, for example, I took part in a full day that was a pitch, where we are developing a virtual memory box, and So there was 7 different companies kind of set up, and you know we've a plan to have that up and running from August of this year. That would never have happened without this. I've got no doubt. I've got no doubt that this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for where we are now, because that's the road that it's set us off on. So yes, that's my hopes.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of my questions today. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Tony and Jenny, Richard, Michelle and Paddy for your time this afternoon, for such a lovely, relaxed and reflective conversation. It's been really lovely to think back 2 years to where we all began. And I'm really looking forward to being part of the next chapters and seeing where we all end up. So thank you very much for being part of our first podcast on creative life story work. So whether you're a foster carer, someone who has experience of the care system, or you work with children and young people, we hope this episode has given you an insight into how we could make life story work better for young people. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so you can tweet us on @WeAreBlueCabin, or if you're one of the 1,500 people taking part in our Creative Life Story Work learning programme, you can always get in touch through the online learning platform. If you'd like to listen to future episodes, remember to subscribe wherever it is you usually get your podcasts, or you can listen on our website at www.wearebluecabin.com/CLSW podcast. Thank you.